Hey there, thanks for watching. I've just come back from Cambodia where I spent a week visiting the tropical island of Koh Rong, taking in the relaxed vibes of Kampot and walking the lively streets of the capital Phnom Penh. This was my first time back to the kingdom in 20 years, so naturally plenty of things have changed since then. Some for the better, and sadly some for the worse. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of my experiences and perspectives on what it's like traveling in Cambodia in 2023, which I hope will help you with your own travel plans should you be thinking about visiting Cambodia in the near future. Okay, let's get into it. Our week in Cambodia kicked off with a 3-night stay on the stunning island of Koh Rong, some 30 minutes or so by speedboat off the southern city of Sihanoukville. If you're after more info about how to get to Koh Rong, be sure to check out this video here. Koh Rong is quite a large island. In fact, it's Cambodia's second largest island at 78 square kilometres, which means there are plenty of opportunities to find long stretches of pristine beach all for yourself around the island, especially on the western side, which features the stunning Long Beach. Here, there are 5 kilometres of talcum powder-like sands and turquoise blue waters with surf. Much of this beach remains undeveloped, except for the odd resort here and there and ruins of what look to be beach houses from another time before the ravages of the weather coming in from the Gulf of Thailand grabbed a hold of them. Quite frankly, I rate this strip of beach as highly as any other beach I've been to in Southeast Asia, and it's even right up there with the beaches of Australia. That's saying something. The most pleasing thing about most of the beaches around Koh Rong is the notable lack of plastic and fishing debris in the waters, unlike Vietnam's beaches, and to a lesser extent Thailand's. We stayed at the treehouse bungalows on the southeastern side of the island for 3 nights at approximately $50 per night, not far from the main ferry terminal, making it a very convenient location. There are a handful of tree houses facing the sea that stand approximately 10 metres high, which really gives you the feeling of sleeping high up in the treetops, along with the monkeys that kindly paid us a visit one morning. Here's a tip: keep food and valuables and yourself safely locked up at all times. The tree houses could do with some refurbishment though. There are sizable gaps in the floorboards and the toilet facilities are very basic, with security being very minimal. Given their height off the ground and lack of safety precautions, this wouldn't be a safe option for young kids or the elderly. We were also murdered by mosquitoes and other insects each night, leaving both of us with welts all over us, scratching them like mad. Some of the rooms have mosquito netting, but it clearly wasn't very effective. Bring your mozzie spray. Breakfast wasn't included in our room rate, and this is where the resort and the entire island falls short actually. For whatever reason, there's a surprising lack of Cambodian food options on the island. In fact, because of that, we ate pizza on 2 occasions and resorted to an overpriced and super disappointing salt and pepper squid one evening at one of the beachside bars and eateries that line the beach near the port, which set us back a ridiculous $6 or $7 for the disappointment. For the entire time on the island, we were disappointed with the food options and availability, which reached its zenith on our final morning before departure, when I was told there was no seasonal fruit option for breakfast. I don't know, perhaps the monkeys had eaten it all? We did, however, have a good lunch one day at the lovely Longset Resort, a short walk along Funky Beach, which again was stunning, but the lunch, a beef stir-fry tom yum soup, 2 soft drinks and 2 coffees, set us back close to $37. As we were beginning to find out, and this goes for the rest of our trip, the food was an expensive letdown. Would I return to Koh Rong? There's no doubt that the beaches are stunning, so perhaps if we stayed on the other side of the island, it might draw me back. But rooms at some resorts there range in price up to around $200 per night. Also, the island lends itself to a clash of cultures of sorts. Koh Rong is popular with European backpackers, with the Nest Hostel renowned for its weekend parties. While we personally don't have an issue with it, it's not really a great look for the island, and the area nearby gets pretty trashy, so pick your time of the week to go. There was also a steady stream of backpackers that passed through the Treehouse Bungalow Resort accommodation area, which raised security concerns for us. In order to get me back, I would have to stay on an isolated part of the island. The food would have to be markedly improved, and I also wouldn't want to be worried about the cost. So I can't really see myself going back anytime soon. But if you're thinking about going, do so soon, because further development is on the way by Royal Group, who I believe has a 99-year lease on the land to develop it, which is already underway, as evidenced by the clearing of this large swathe of land in the centre of the island. After 3 nights on Koh Rong, our travels took us to Kampot, just 2 hours by train from Sihanoukville. If you'd like more information about train travel in Cambodia, check out this video here. The sleepy town of Kampot is in the southwestern corner of Cambodia, and the province of the same name borders Vietnam's Quien Yang province in the Mekong Delta. In fact, the Vietnamese border town of Ha Tien is just 50 kilometres from Kampot, which sits on the banks of the beautiful Prac Tuc Chu River. Apologies to any Khmer speakers watching this. Under French colonial rule in the late 1800s to the mid-1900s, Kampot was Cambodia's most important seaport, before the establishment of Sihanoukville around the time the French left in the 1950s. The town is notable for its French colonial architecture of the time, but to be frank, most of the buildings we saw while we were there looked dilapidated and tired. If the architecture is one of your main reasons for considering a visit to Kampot, you may want to think again. I just didn't get any real French colonial vibes while there. Rather, as I said, it felt more for the most part dusty and tired, except for the days that it rained. It's been mooted that the town is hoping to gain UNESCO World Heritage Site listing. However, based on what I saw, I think this will be a stretch if other World Heritage Sites in the region are anything to go by. We stayed at the quite lovely bamboo bungalows on the river about 2 kilometres out of town. There are 3 bungalows perched right on the riverbank, in which the room doors open out onto a small deck big enough for 2 people, and where you can sit with a cool beer and just watch the river life go by. These rooms are about $30 a night, but there are also garden view rooms, which are probably cheaper, but actually newer and nicer inside. The river is a highlight in a town that, for me, doesn't really have that much going for it, to be honest. I understand that it's highly rated by travellers, especially if the YouTube videos of late are anything to go by. But for me, Kampot sorely underdelivered. Perhaps the kind of travellers it appeals to are backpackers looking for something a little more off the beaten path and budget friendly, or jaded Westerners running away from previous lives. And when a tourist highlight is a pepper farm and a roundabout with an ugly, overripe looking durian as its centrepiece, then you know that once you've ticked those off the list, you've just about seen everything that there is to see. I'm sorry, but this was a big letdown. Having said that though, the Hotel Old Cinema is very charming and might be somewhere to consider a stay. The Art Deco facade of the 1950s era cinema that started out life as a theatre in the 1930s has been beautifully restored, but it's the only remaining piece of the original structure. Everything else was built from the ground up in 2019. It's without a doubt the most beautiful building we came across during our stay, although the old fish market building on the river, which is now a restaurant, is also lovely. Now, if you've followed my channel or my social media for a while, you'll know I'm a huge fan of markets, and the Samaki market is a must visit. It's quite a rustic old provincial style market that's pretty dark, dank and grubby, with a roof that feels like it could cave in at any moment under a heavy rainy season deluge. But it's super interesting and boasts a large collection of jewellers whose displays bring a golden glow to the market, and where you can see staff melting down gold and silver to refashion into new pieces of jewellery. Sadly, however, I believe it's at this market where I picked up the worst case of the shits I've had since living in this part of the world. It's hard to know when these things will strike, isn't it? The stall where I ate was busy with local ladies having breakfast. It seemed to tick all the boxes, but I think this bowl of Namban Chok Kari Moan, basically chicken curry noodle soup, was, well, foul. While my bout of Kampot belly turned the 4-hour train ride to Phnom Penh the next day into one of the biggest battles of my life to date, it didn't have an impact on my opinion of Kampot as a destination. I mean, I've had it plenty of times before in Saigon, but I still love this city. I guess it'll just make my memories of Kampot endure for that little bit longer. Thankfully, I arrived in the capital Phnom Penh without any major incidents. I was keen to see how much the city had changed since I was here 20 years ago. Again, recent YouTube videos I'd watched painted a very positive picture of the town, almost to the point of simping, such were the gushing reviews. There's a lot of love out there for Phnom Penh, as there has been throughout its history, with it once being known as the Pearl of Asia in the early part of the 20th century before being thrust into darkness towards the end of it by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. 20 years ago, I didn't visit S21, the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, because I'd spent the morning at the killing fields and felt that it was just too much for one visit. This time round, I made a point of visiting, and I'm glad I did. It's an extremely moving experience that everyone who visits Phnom Penh should experience at least once. Entry is just $5 or $10 with an audio guide. I thought I had a fairly good grip on what happened there, but nothing prepared me for the emotions that emerged when I actually visited. It's very well done, and while morbid, given that close to 20,000 people were tortured and exterminated here, the spaces are well curated and organised so you don't miss out on the full story. Having some of the survivors of the camp on the ground selling their books is a nice touch too, and allows you to connect and pay your respects on a more personal and much deeper level. While Phnom Penh has obviously developed over the past decades, it's here that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is perhaps most evident, however. This was exemplified for us near the Old Market, just blocks from the Royal Palace, where speeding Range Rovers and Lexuses with dark tinted windows paid scant regard for anyone on the rubbish-strewn streets that stink to high heaven. Although, in all fairness, I was impressed by how clean the rest of the streets generally are, and that goes for Kampot too. I'd like to know how they've achieved it, so if you know, let me know in the comments below. In the absence of any noticeable police presence on the streets, it's a credit to the locals for seemingly not giving in to the throwaway culture that besets Vietnam. But I suspect that one major reason for it is the obvious lack of a vibrant street food culture in Cambodia that you get in Vietnam, for example. I noticed this in Bangkok earlier in the year, where apparently many of the street food vendors have been brought inside with more regulated conditions. Cambodia's street food scene reminds me of that. Clearly, you can't have one and expect the other, meaning you can't have a vibrant street food scene without garbage accumulating on the streets. Or maybe you can, I don't know. Speaking of food, again, I found it expensive in Phnom Penh, and by and large, left me disappointed. On one occasion, which happened to be my wife's birthday, we went to an American-style barbecue joint, just a few doors down from our hotel. For an avocado dip, 5 small pieces of fried chicken, and 2 dry-aged beef sliders with 3 cocktails, our bill came to a hefty $35. The quality was lacking and largely left me unsatisfied. We stayed at the nearby Plantation Urban Resort and Spa for around $90 per night, which we found very pleasant, the staff were excellent, and it included a buffet breakfast. Its location right down the street from the Royal Palace is excellent. if you want to explore the city centre on foot. I recommend it. All in all, I'd have to say Phnom Penh was the highlight of the trip for me, as I was eager to see how it had developed over the past couple of decades, and it definitely deserves a few days to check out. But now that I've scratched that itch, I don't really have a desire to return anytime soon. So there you have it, my review, albeit brief, of my experience travelling to Cambodia in 2023. Would I go back for a holiday? Never say never, but by and large, it failed to deliver on my expectations built up by travel vlogs and travel articles over the past year or so. Perhaps my expectations were unrealistic too, given that 20 years ago, Cambodia was an extremely challenging country to travel in, and therefore, perhaps by default, I expected it to be much more vibrant and cosmopolitan than it is in 2023. Don't get me wrong though, clearly much has changed for the better, and surely there are far greater opportunities for Cambodians to make better lives for themselves and their families these days. However, I'm concerned about what the immediate future holds for the country, given that its economy relies on agriculture, garment manufacturing and tourism, with tourism especially relying heavily on the Chinese market, which is clearly taking its time to recover. And then there's the small issue of how much it costs to travel in Cambodia. From my experience, I found it more expensive than Vietnam, with fewer options and inferior quality across the board. Clearly, with China's heavy investment in the country, think major infrastructure projects like highways, seaports, airports and buildings, and the country's reliance on imported fuel, it's having a major impact on the cost of living and the cost of travel in Cambodia, not to mention the availability of high quality products and services at reasonable prices. There's an election coming up next month, which has people on tenterhooks, with many of the locals I spoke to resigned to the fact that the result is destined for the continuation of the status quo, where close to 20% of the population still lives below the poverty line, and the average salary is around $200 per month. The Cambodians are lovely people, and our interactions with them during our stay were a highlight for sure. So this may be enough of a motivation for you to visit this year, but you're gonna have to weigh it up because it'll cost you. See you in the next video.